I hope you enjoy your events in this year's digital programme and that they spark in you thoughts and conversations and feelings. All the things that a good book should do, and all the things that a wonderful book festival like Edinburgh International Book Festival does too. It's a book festival that's really dear to my heart. It's one of the first festivals I attended as a new author. I was part of their Outriders Africa programme, and every year returning to it feels a little bit like coming back to a literary home. It's such a pleasure to see them going online this year, and I'm so excited for the future of Edinburgh International Book Festival.
Hello, my name is Lennie Goodings, and I'm here to welcome you to the Edinburgh International Book Festival. And today, I have the very great pleasure of interviewing Ann Goldstein. So I'm going to introduce her first. She's been a translator for nearly 20 years of Elena Ferrante, most famous for her Neapolitan novels, particularly My Brilliant Friend. Ann has also translated Primo Levi, Jhumpa Lahiri, and she continues to translate from Italian. She's recently retired from the New Yorker, where she was for 45 years, most of that time presiding over the very esteemed copy editing department, where she edited the likes of John Updike and Janet Malcolm. And I'm speaking to her today from my house in London to hers in New York. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Lennie. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you.
Yeah, it's so great. I'm so thrilled to be talking to you, actually. So what we're here to do today, I'm going to ask a lot of things, and we're never going to we're going to be way beyond 45 minutes, but we will try. But we're here especially to talk to you today about the new Elena Ferrante novel, The Lying Life of Adults. And the fact that I've got all these post-its just testifies to how much I enjoyed this. It's so compelling. I really, really enjoyed it. So, but I'd like you to start to tell us the story of how, I'm going to say this, how you became one of the most famous translators in the world today. I knew you would balk at that, but it's true. So tell us the story. So you were at the New Yorker.
Well, it actually started with Dante. I read Dante in college, and I was very taken by it. I actually took the same Dante class twice. But I had developed this ambition to read Dante in Italian. And when I was at the New Yorker, I somehow interested some of my colleagues in reading Dante in Italian. And so we found one of my colleagues well, it's a complicated story. Anyway, she knew a woman who was willing to teach us a year of Italian grammar. And then we read the Divine Comedy. I mean, it was kind of a bold undertaking.
Yeah.
But that's what we did. And from there, I became sort of obsessed with Italian, I guess you could say. And I went on studying it and reading it.
And then, so how did you get the gig? How did you get the job of translating? Tell us about that. Of doing Elena's book.
I'd been translating by then for about, I don't know, I guess I started in the early 90s. So this was in about 2004. And it was after 2001, Sandra and Sandro Ferri, who were the owners of a book publishing company called Edizione AO in Rome, decided that they wanted to branch out into publishing in English. And they had been publishers of Ferrante in Italy. And so their first book in English, they decided would be The Days of Abandonment. And they sort of randomly asked a bunch of people to do sample translations. I think they got my name from the Penn website. Mm. And I won this little competition.
You sure did.
So great. Yeah, I later discovered who some of the other contestants were. We sort of have a laugh about it.
Yeah. And so now you've been her translator for nearly 2 decades, 16 years we were working at it. But you've never met her, have you? You've never met her?
No, nobody has ever met. I mean, I've never knowingly met her, put it that way.
Yeah. And so what is your relationship with her? How do you relate to her? And
I think that my real relationship with her is through her books. I mean, I sort of, maybe more than reader, sort of ordinary readers. I mean, I'm not an ordinary reader in the sense that I read her books many times, but I feel like that the person that wrote the books is often the person that's narrating the books. I mean, not literally, but the person that's writing the books. So I feel like that's who my relationship is this kind of, is the writer. I mean, the abstract writer or the disembodied writer, I guess. And if I need to get in touch with her, if I have a problem, if I want to ask a question, I usually do that through the publishers, who, as far as I know, are the only people that know her or that are in touch with her directly.
so you talk to her via her publishers, via email. Yes. You don't email directly with her.
I don't email directly with her. I mean, in the beginning, she was very reclusive, you could say. I mean, I don't know if you can call an anonymous person reclusive, but she really didn't have much of a public figure. I mean, as she's gotten more popular and people have been more interested in her, she's certainly done more interviews. I mean, she published a book called The Franc de Malia, which is a collection of letters and interviews. So she sort of, in that sense, has become more public and done more interviews. But my relationship with her has pretty much stayed at secondhand through the publishers. I don't know, somehow it seems more comfortable to me.
Maybe that keeps you closer just to the text and not all the...
I think that's true. I think it's true.
So she's always been anonymous. I mean, although recently people have come out and said various names, including Anita Raja. But for you, she's been anonymous, and you obviously like that. But the result of that is, as you as the translator, and a lot of it's fallen on your shoulders now, hasn't it? And I was reading, the public. So I was reading about somebody talking about translating and saying that the highest achievement of a translator is to disappear. But in this case, the author disappeared and not the translator.
Right. No, it's true. I mean, there is that theory that the translator should in the text, I think that's, in some sense, that's true, that you shouldn't be aware necessarily. You shouldn't be aware that you're reading something. Well, you should be aware of the translator, but you shouldn't necessarily be aware of the fact that it's not a good read.
Yes, we should be swept into the English, shouldn't we? Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
But you've become a bit of the public person, which is an unusual thing for a translator. How do you feel about that?
Well, in the beginning, it sort of happened gradually. I mean, I sort of didn't really realize it was happening. People were, saying, well, asking me to speak about the books. And it's very clear. I mean, I made it very clear from the start. I mean, I'm not speaking as the author. I'm not speaking for the books. I mean, I'm not speaking as the person who wrote the books, but I can speak about the books, and I can speak about translation. And I think it's good for translators to have a public, to be public, because they're sort of forgotten in a way. You sort of forget that. I used to have this joke about when people were reviewing translations. Like they'll quote huge amounts of text as if the writer had written that huge amount of text, whereas of course the translator is the person who actually wrote that text. But this is a joke that I would have a charm bracelet with all the adjectives. Like a reviewer will have one adjective about the translation, and I would have like deaf,
grab that.
Or, right, exactly, or adequate or whatever,
Yeah. Ooh, we're doing better than adequate here. That's for sure, actually.
Well,
and also often authors do what Elena has done with you, is they stick with their translator, don't they? So they'll have, their English translator, their Dutch translator, whatever,
right.
Don't they?
Yeah.
So you build up quite a close relationship with the author, despite not knowing her in this case.
Yeah. Well, with the text, I mean, I actually in my career, I've translated a lot of dead writers.
Yes.
So I'm kind of used to not having a personal relationship with the author.
Yeah.
And having a relationship mainly with the text.
And what's your feeling about her wanting to be anonymous?
And
the feeling that people want to know who she is. What's your feeling about the whole?
It's irrelevant. I mean, it's irrelevant. Of course, it should be irrelevant. I mean, of course, people are always interested in, who somebody is and what their life is like and all this kind of stuff. But she made a decision with her first book that I mean, for whatever reasons, I think maybe in the beginning they were more personal, but it also became sort of a political position where she's written about this, about, not wanting to participate in the marketplace of the literary marketplace. And she's been consistent about it. And that seems like her choice. If she's able to do it, I mean,
Well, I mean, partly thanks to you, but no, I must say I agree with her. I agree with you. I think if she wants to be anonymous, I think that's completely fine, actually. Yeah. And people's hunger to know the author is quite curious, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, you've got, she says, one place she says, well, I wrote the book, I've done my part.
I know, read the damn book is what you want to say, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of the book, so I think, let's talk about that, the lying life of adults, which I said to you there's an English expression which does exactly what it says on the tin. And this is a very well named book. That's exactly what's happening in this novel, and the discovery of the lying life, it could have been called, I guess, too. So I'm going to ask you to read a little bit from the beginning, but first, I'm going to have a little go at describing the novel, and you can add to it if you don't think I've got it right.
I'm sure you
or enough. So it's set in Naples, but this time the important thing is that it's set in a more middle-class area of Naples than we've come to know through the Neapolitan novels. But our heroine, who's a young girl, gets drawn back to the old, rougher neighborhoods. And I love it. It's at one point they describe that she's going down, 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 isn't she? Yeah. There really is a feeling like into the mire and the kind of anarchy of that rougher neighborhood. It's the story of female adolescents, Giovanna, sorry, you're gonna have to get Giovanna, get me all right on my Italian. She's our girl, and it's told in her voice, first person. She's 12 when the novel opens and just past 16 when it ends, which makes it sound like it's almost like a YA novel, but it's so not, isn't it? It's only when I thought back did I think, oh yeah, she is only that age, because it's a very mature book. And it's about friendship, it's about coming of age. There's a lovely line in it too about your line, Mother, which says, I feel it's about the desire to gain the capacity to inspire love. That's one of the things that she's up against. And it's about awakenings of all sorts. So over to you to add to that if you like, and then to read us the beginning.
Oh, I think that's a good description of it. I mean, it's interesting because it does have a lot of the same themes as her other books, but it's very different. Mm. So I'm going to read just from the beginning, so I don't think that needs any introduction.
Okay.
2 years before leaving home, my father said to my mother that I was very ugly. The sentence was uttered under his breath in the apartment that my parents, newly married, had bought at the top of Via San Giacomo dei Capri in Rione Alto, which means upper neighborhood or high neighborhood, as you were saying. Everything, the spaces of Naples, the blue light of a frigid February, those words remained fixed. But I slipped away and am still slipping away within these lines that are intended to give me a story. Well, in fact, I am nothing of my own, nothing that has really begun or really been brought to completion, only a tangled knot, and nobody, not even the one who at this moment is writing, knows if it contains the right thread for a story or is merely a snarled confusion of suffering without redemption. I loved my father very much. He was an unfailingly courteous man. A refined manner perfectly matched a body so slender that his clothes seemed a size too large, and this, to my eyes, gave him a look of inimitable elegance. His features were delicate and nothing. Deep-set eyes with long lashes, impeccably engineered nose, full lips, spoiled their harmony. With me, he had an air of cheerfulness on every occasion, whatever his mood or mine, and he never shut himself in his study. He was always studying, unless he got at least a smile out of me. He especially liked my hair, but it's hard to say now when he started praising it. Maybe when I was 2 or 3. Certainly during my childhood, we had conversations like this. What lovely hair, so fine, so shiny. Will you give it to me? No, it's mine. How about a little generosity? If you want, I can lend it to you. Excellent, then I just won't give it back to you. You already have yours. What I have, I took from you. That's not true, you're lying. Check for yourself. yours was too pretty and I stole it. I would check, but just to play along. I knew he would never steal it. And I laughed. I laughed a lot. I had much more fun with him than with my mother. He always wanted something of mine. My ear, my nose, my chin. They were so perfect, he said. He just couldn't live without them. I loved that tone, which proved to me over and over again how indispensable I was to him. Naturally, my father wasn't like that with everyone. At times, when he was really caught up in something, he tended to frantically mash together sophisticated arguments and uncontrolled emotions. At other times, instead, he was curt, resorting to brief, extremely precise phrases, so dense that no one could refute them. These were two fathers very different from the one I loved, and I had started to discover their existence at the age of 7 or 8, when I heard him arguing with the friends and acquaintances who on occasion came to our house for meetings that could become very heated on issues I knew nothing about. In general, I stayed with my mother in the kitchen and paid little attention to the squabbling just a little ways off. But sometimes when my mother was busy and closed herself in her room, I was left alone in the hall, playing or reading. Mostly reading, I would say, because my father read a lot and my mother too, and I loved being like them. I didn't listen to the arguments. I broke off my game or my reading only when there was a sudden silence and those alien voices of my father's arose. From then on, he would dominate, and I waited for the meeting to end to find out if he had gone back to his usual self, the one with the gentle and affectionate tones. The night he made that statement, he had just learned that I wasn't doing well in school. It was something new. I had always done well since first grade, and only in the past 2 months had started doing badly. But it was very important to my parents that I be successful in school, and at the first poor grades, my mother especially was alarmed. What's going on? I don't know. You have to study. I do study. And so, well, some things I remember and some I don't. Study until you remember everything. I studied until I was exhausted, but the results continued to be disappointing. That afternoon, in fact, my mother had gone to talk to the teachers and had returned very unhappy. She didn't scold me. My parents never scolded me. She merely said, the mathematics teacher is the one who is most dissatisfied, but she says that if you want to, you can do it. Then my mother went into the kitchen to make dinner, and meanwhile my father came home. All I could hear from my room was that she was giving him a summary of the teacher's complaints, and I understood that she was bringing up as an excuse the changes of early adolescence. But he interrupted her, and in one of the tones that he never used with me, even giving into dialect, which was completely banned in our house, let slip what he surely wouldn't have wanted to come out of his mouth. Adolescence has nothing to do with it. She's getting the face of Vittoria. I'm sure that if he'd known I could hear him, he would never have used a tone so far removed from our usual playful ease. They both thought the door of my room was closed. I always closed it, and they didn't realize that one of them had left it open. So it was that at the age of 12, I learned from my father's voice, muffled by the effort to keep it low, that I was becoming like his sister, a woman in whom I had heard him say, as long as I could remember, ugliness and spite were combined to perfection.
Yeah, well, it's a great introduction, isn't it? You really,
you want to keep going.
Oh yeah, I mean, she's so good at kind of, what I think is she's so good at luring you in, really. And that's the question I wanted to ask you is, why do you think her books are so compelling? What makes them so compelling?
Well, one thing, she herself in interviews has said that she wants to be read, and it's very important to her for the reader to want to turn the page, and she therefore will use any means at her disposal to keep the reader reading. Why she's so popular, is another question. I mean, I think one of the reasons is because she's very good at that, and another is that she writes about things I think that are very important to many people. I mean, people. It's been said a lot. I think that people, especially in the Neapolitan novels, people recognize themselves in many ways. I mean, we all have relationships with mothers, fathers, husbands, or other, whatever, all friends, obviously. And she somehow gets at the inner workings of these relationships in ways that we don't necessarily go on our own.
And what about, I mean, I find her very intense as well, which I think is part of the reason it's so compelling, don't you?
Yes, I agree. I mean, I always talk about from the point of view of the sentences, but her sentences are quite, they're intense, and they sort of have they seem to have a goal. They sort of rush forward and then they stop you, or she says she wants to get to the truth of something. And I think even within her sentences, she's trying to get at something. I mean, she often uses this, scavare, dig. She's digging to get to somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I think is really engaging about her is that she shows emotions and relationships that are kind of not okay in lots of places. So there's some odd relationships in this book, that's for certain. But she doesn't have a judgment about them, does she? It sort of says, this is what life's like. Of course we have odd relationships with people. Of course we care for the wrong people.
No, that's a great point. Yeah. No, she doesn't. She just wants you to, to look at them. I mean, to see what is the truth of this relationship. Yeah.
So I was really interested when you told me that because of the tight deadlines, some of the times you're actually translating as you read. So it's not, you haven't read the book first and then get the idea, but you're like us, oh my God, what's going to happen next, actually. But I wanted to know if you are, if you're translating, I know there's obviously you're not creating, but you are creating at the same time. So do you feel like you're inhabiting the novel like a writer? Is that, does it feel like that you're unfolding the book as well?
In some ways it does, because you have to or you're unfolding a version of the book. I mean, you don't have to think what's going to happen next. You're just like the writer, or what this character might do or might not do. But you definitely have to be, especially, I guess we were talking about this, as Ferrante writes always, at least so far, she's always written as a first person narrator. And I do feel that I get very, overtaken by that first person narrator. It's not my voice, but I'm channeling that voice in a sense, I guess you could say. I remember when I finished the third volume of the Neapolitan novels, I kept thinking there was something missing from my life, and I realized it was the voices of the characters in my mind. So
you're like how novelists always say that they feel bereft when they're people when they finish the book. You must feel the same.
It is a little bit like that, yeah.
But you also said this interesting thing that copy editing, which is like translating. You might give us a quick definition of what copy editing is, in case I shouldn't think most people know what that is.
Oh, well, at the New Yorker, which is where I did all my copy editing, it's sort of like line editing. I mean, you're really, you're looking at the text very closely. You're fixing the grammar, the spelling, the punctuation, all those obvious things. And you're also fixing the way the writer has expressed him or herself. I mean, trying to make it logical, make the sentences as good as you think that writer is, or to be in the voice of that writer. I mean, you're doing a lot of things like that. That's our sort of type of copy editing. And it is like translating in the sense that you're looking at a text from a very, I don't know what you'd call it, low point of view, from the point of view of the elements that make up that text, the words, sentence, the paragraph. In translating particularly, you have to make sure that everything goes together. Because sometimes, for example, you think, I use a lot of different dictionaries, of course, and synonym dictionaries, different language different types of language dictionaries. And sometimes you think, oh, I've got the perfect word. Now I've looked all these places, you can't get the right word. Finally, you think this is the right translation for this word. Then you read it in the sentence and you realize it's not the right translation for the word because it doesn't fit with the sentence.
Yeah. No, it's really particular. I think it's more exacting than the actual writing in some ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways, because you've got to figure out what the author wants.
Exactly. I know. So let's go back to the novel, because one of the sort of specter that's been raised by that beginning that you just read is the Giovanna's aunt, who's called Vittoria. And she is like the Wicked Witch in some ways, isn't she? And one of the things I was very struck by when I was reading this is there's a sort of myth, fairy tale sort of underpinning of the novel. I was thinking about Sleeping Beauty, for example, who has the wicked witch and is concerned with the beauty and the ugliness, that seems to be. And then also like fairy tales that you get to become your true self despite your parents. You know what I mean? You know, this real person emerges, never mind these people who gave birth to you. So Elena, and also Elena plays with male rescue, I think, quite a lot, which is a very fairy tale thing. But she really loves her women, doesn't she? I think she's a little bit, a lot of her men are not necessarily men you want in your life, but you certainly want these women. But even the wicked ones. So there's a fabulous character named Vittoria. And can you just tell us a little bit about her, but also you have a little paragraph to read, don't you, which just sort of describes our little wicked witch. So it's, go ahead. So this is Giovanni's aunt, Giovanna, sorry.
So she's realized, she's convinced her father. Her father is from this lower neighborhood, and he's managed to raise himself by basically ignoring his family and his origins. Hence one of the lies, I guess. I don't want to give anything away. But she's convinced her father to take her to visit her aunt. And so she's just climbed the stairs to her aunt's apartment. And she's rung the bell. She's rung the bell twice because she didn't answer the first time. A shout in dialect reached me, an explosion of hoarse sounds. And God damn it, what's the hurry? I'm coming. Then decisive steps, a key that turned 4 times in the lock. The door opened. A woman dressed all in blue appeared, tall, with a great mass of very black hair arranged on her neck, as thin as a post, and yet with broad shoulders and a large chest. She held a lighted cigarette between her fingers. She coughed and said, moving back and forth between Italian and dialect, "What's the matter? You're sick? You have to pee?" "No." "So why do you ring twice?" I murmured, "I'm Giovanna, Aunt." "I know you're Giovanna, but if you call me Aunt again, you'd better turn right around and get out of here." I nodded yes. I was frightened. I looked for a few seconds at her face without makeup, then stared at the floor. Vittoria seemed to me to have a beauty so unbearable that to consider her ugly became a necessity.
Yeah, that's good.
Pretty dramatic. First meeting is pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you feel like, you know, Meryl Streep sort of playing Cruella de Vil or something like that. I mean, you know, I know she doesn't completely describe it that, but I feel there's a real witch quality to this. And she really does. She bewitches Giovanna as well, doesn't she?
Yes, and she also represents for the father, I mean, which is, you know, represents the origins that he's trying to get away from. And in addition to her being this, I mean, as he would say, a low person, I mean, an uneducated, mean, cruel person. And so there's this war going on where the father, you know, and then the father being a modern father isn't, in the end, doesn't say you can't see her. He just allows it and hopes that she won't get bewitched. And after a while, she isn't so bewitched. But
so I actually thought that class is really fascinating in this novel, and as is in the Neapolitan novels too. And I read a quote where Elena Ferrante said of herself, interesting, even though we don't know anything about her, that she said, "I feel the guilt of leaving class behind. Class origins cannot be erased." And it seems to me that on one level, this novel is very much about the cost of ignoring your origins, you know, that you pay for that if you turn your back on who you are, don't you?
Right. Yeah. And I think the father, well, he kind of pays for it, but he doesn't really.
Yeah, I know. He's a bit of a slippery character.
Yeah.
But he's not at ease, is he? And
no, he's not. And he's always got this thing behind him that's there, and he can't forget that it's there. And he doesn't, of course, like that his daughter reminds him.
Yeah, exactly. And she goes to the equivalent of the underworld, doesn't she?
Right.
I mean, you know, there's a very nice sort of dichotomy in the novel, isn't it? That is played out with class, but it's also, you know, she's dressed in pink, isn't she? She's a very good little girl. And then she's allowed to go into this sort of underworld and have all her illusions shattered, actually, basically, isn't she?
And it sort of helps that Naples, the city of Naples, I mean, many cities are like that, but Naples particularly has this literally upper part that's the more middle class, the more wealthy, and the lower part, which is where the poor people live, or the working class.
Exactly. The other thing I think she's really good on, aside from relationships, is I think she's great on sex. And, you know, we really are from Giovanna's point of view, because I say she's 12 at the beginning, but, she does really, Vittoria opens her eyes, but not just Vittoria. But I think Elena, and in her other novels too, she's good at that, and not, again, not judgmental.
Right. Yeah, no, she does. I mean, if you think about it, she does write a lot about sex and a lot about bad sex.
Yeah, exactly.
Or bad sexual experiences.
Exactly, yeah. But again, it's truth, isn't it? It's truthful.
Yeah, it's not sensational in any way. It's just, she's just telling you these things that happen.
And just to continue the thing about truth is that, the book is called The Lying Life of Adults. I keep wanting to make it Lying Lives, but Lying Life of Adults. And the adults in Giovanni's world keep saying to her, "You'll understand when you grow up."
Right.
Again, and it's another kind of divide, isn't it? The adolescence to the adult thing. But it turns out that the truth that they're keeping from her is that living to be an adult is to live lies, at least in this novel, isn't it?
Yeah. That it's sort of impossible not to live, or at least for them.
Yeah. But I think that's partly to do with the class thing too, don't you? Is that the lie that they've become other things that they're not.
I see what you mean. Yeah, right. It's not just lies that they tell, it's lies that that are part of their, yes, yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah.
And so you spoke kind of beguilingly yourself about that bit of Naples that's very seductive, which I've been to as well. I'm sure the world has been to it now. We can blame you and Elena Ferrante, I think, actually, for probably either making the tourist industry work or ruining Naples. I'm not sure which. But what is your relationship with Naples? Do you visit there a lot? And is it?
Well, oddly, I had been there a lot in when I first started going to Italy, which was since I learned Italian quite late. I didn't start going to Italy till quite late in my life, but yes, so in the beginning, I had been to Naples in sort of like the late 80s and early 90s, but I never went to Naples at all during the time that I was working on the Neapolitan novels, which is really unfortunate, I think. I mean, it was kind of too bad. Since then, I've been several times, but it's not a city that I wouldn't say that I know it really well. I've seen a lot of it, and I know a lot about it, obviously, but I didn't. Oh, I'm sorry, what?
No, I was going to say, I want to know what you love about the Italian language then, particularly, because that's obviously that drew you in before.
It's the most beautiful language in the world. It's clear.
Why is it so beautiful?
I think just the sound. I think the sound of it. I don't know. I mean, it was hard for me to analyze why it's so beautiful, but I think that the sound of it is incredibly beautiful, and I think that's what attracted me. Part of what attracted me was the sound of it. When I first read Dante, which was the first Italian, I had read it. I had studied it, Latin and French, but I had never studied Italian. And it seemed to me that Italian had a much more refined sound than either of those languages. I don't know, refined, much more expressive. And I forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, it just, and then reading Dante was the first thing that I read. And I was in college. I was at the age of, sort of seeking. And Dante is all about seeking. And so I think that it really just drew me in.
Yeah.
So it was both a sort of a physical thing of the language and also a intellectual.
Yeah. And do you feel a different person when you speak Italian?
I want to be a different person when I speak. I don't know if I always succeed.
How is the Italian Anne different than the New Yorker Anne?
Well, I hope that I have. Well, it is a secret desire of mine to be an Italian woman, but I think that the Italian person would be much more outgoing. You would have all those vowels and those consonants, those double consonants would be, sort of supporting you and making you much more yourself in some way.
Yeah, interesting. So, and to talk about your relationship now with the New Yorker as opposed to being a New Yorker, So you're in the copy department, and copy editing department? Did you find that people like being edited? I mean, you edited John Updike and
Yeah.
Malcolm, people like that. And I'm asking you partly because I am an editor, as you know,
Well,
a book editor, and
yeah.
People respond differently to editing, don't they?
They do, and it seems to me that actually the best writers, I mean, Updike loved editing. I mean, they really respond well to it. They consider the queries. We at the New Yorker, we don't basically edit by querying, but there are queries and there are queries that aren't really queries. But yeah, I mean, I think that the best writers are always appreciative of editing, of what makes their writing better. I mean, there are always people that resist it. I mean, a lot of people when they first come to the New Yorker, they can be surprised by the amount of editing. Or
yes, you're famous for that, frankly.
Yeah.
I don't mean you personally, but
No, but especially from the point of view of copy editing, in a way. But most people get to like it, I think, and get to rely on it. I don't mean in a bad way. I just mean, to be able to discuss their sentences with somebody, or know that somebody will, make sure they don't make some kind of mistake, or I'm not talking about fact checking, just a grammatical mistake. I mean, and I think that a good copy editor, a good editor, knows the writer. I mean, gets to know the writer and knows what that writer will, wants to say, knows that writer's style, and isn't going to do something that completely, obliterates the style. The New Yorker is often accused of that, oh, it all sounds the same. But I actually don't think that's true. I think that the copy editors and the editors are respectful of, assuming that the writer has a style.
Yes. I remember that someone like Angela Carter, who has a very particular style, and if you get the wrong copy editor on her, they used to, would just ruin the style. You do have to go with the person, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. Very much.
And do you ever feel like you want to edit Elena Ferrante, or do you slyly edit as you go?
I don't really edit. I mean, well, of course, you're always editing. I mean, if you're writing something, if I'm writing something, I mean, I'm writing a book in English, you could put it that way. I mean, on the level of sentences, yes, I am editing. I mean, I try not to do too. I mean, I'm sort of a pretty faithful translator. I mean, pretty liberal-minded translator. I think that's partly because as a copy editor, I'm kind of liberal-minded. I mean, you get that way. And I try not to. I try to keep the style, let's say, the way, as close to the original as possible, but without straining the English.
Mm. And do you find that I think there's a sort of myth for people who don't publish or write, that the writer just does everything, and then when they find out there's copy editors and editors behind them, there's a slight feeling like, wait a minute, it's not purely the writer, but if you're in the business, you understand that writing is a collaboration in so many ways, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I've never really encountered that so much, that it's not, that the writer feels that you've somehow, that it's not his or her work anymore. Is that what you said?
No, I was thinking more readers, when their readers feel that, if there's a lot of people, there's only one person's name on the book, and yet look, all these people who seem to.
Yeah, that's true. Well, but yes, it always is a collaborative effort. I mean, a translation too is, translation obviously collaborative because there's a writer involved, but there's also an editor, copy editor, proofreader.
Yeah, that's right. And have you ever had pushback from Elena Ferrante on something, because her English is okay, isn't it? So
I think she reads English. Yeah. I don't know if she's read all the translations. I don't think so, but I don't know. But she's never complained. Let's just say.
Well, that's your mark then, isn't it? Which of her books that you've translated now, which one you were saying that you feel, I like the idea that you're bereft when you finish, especially the Neapolitan novels. But which of her characters sort of stay with you?
Well, I mean, I really think that all those women narrators stay with me. A little less Giovanna because she's younger, but the other women narrators are mostly, well, especially Elena, because I think, I mean, in the Neapolitan novels, because she's, you know, she's more or less the same age as me. We sort of lived through the same period of history. So I think that I probably do feel in some ways closest to her.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever share that with Elena?
No.
Do you talk about the character? You don't talk about the characters?
No, I don't really talk to her. I only talk to her when I have.
Oh yeah, when you're saying
something.
What does this word mean, sort of thing.
Or just, you know, yeah. What is yeah.
Oh God, it's a very funny. It's slightly through a glass darkly, isn't it? That you're totally in that world, and yet it's not your world of your making, and
No.
yet it is your world of you making it too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. It's a strange. Yeah, you're right. It's an odd situation in a way.
Mm. I like the fact. So you say Elena, but we're thinking of her two characters, aren't we? In Lennie, the girls, the two friends.
Yes, Elena and Lila. Yeah.
That's right. How curious is it the name is so close to Elena too?
Well, I mean, speaking of mirrors, she's very.
I know.
She likes to do those. I mean, do the Elena, you know, play around with these kinds of things. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, her name is Elena Greco, which is Greek,
Mm-hmm.
and she's, as far as we know, she is a classicist. So there's Elena, Helen, Greek. You know, these little
These hints.
hints.
Do you sort of you know, I mean, you can't help but be a detective like the rest of us trying to work out who she is, or maybe you don't. But I mean, do you store up some of those little things and think, oh, I can see that's something?
I don't really store them up. No, I don't, because I don't really. I mean, in the beginning, especially in Italy, there was a huge amount of speculation about who she was, and they speculate. I mean, there were, you know, famous people, not famous people. I mean, I think it was a little less intense in America because Americans wouldn't have, or English Anglophone people wouldn't have known who any of these characters were, so it didn't matter so much.
Mm.
I mean, I think it mattered to some people that the fact that she was anonymous, but not trying to figure out who she was. So I've never really gotten involved in that. I mean, you know, I read the little bits of autobiography, but are they really her autobiography? You don't even know.
Yeah.
So,
what do you think?
I don't know. I honestly don't. I mean, they could be, or they could be part of the fabrication that's Elena Ferrante. But I prefer to think only that there's someone is writing these books. I don't think it's a group. Some people think it's a group of people. I don't think that. But anyway, whoever is writing these books, that is a person that I'm happy to have a relationship with.
I think that's good. I think that's a good place to stop. I think you've done a very nice job telling us about her. You know, she's going to be forever curious to us all. I mean, you just can't help but want to know more. But I also feel like we can honor her view, which is that, you know, read the books. That is the text is what the book is what matters, not the creator in this case. And you know, we will go along with that, won't we? I think that's true. So thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, Lennie, very much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed talking to you.
It's a great pleasure. So the book is called The Lying Life of Adults, and it certainly is just that. And you can buy this book afterwards at shop.edbookfest.co.uk. So just left for me to say thanks so much, Anne. Thank you for coming to visit us from New York. It's a great pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye.